Let's start with that quote because it perfectly captures the knife's edge situation in Gaza. After 2 incredibly devastating years of war, there's this fragile peace. But the path forward? Well, it is anything but clear.
So, what is this deal that's supposed to bring everything back from the brink? Today, we're going to break down the ambitious U.S. brokered peace plan. It's an agreement that was really built on some massive hopes, but as we're about to see, it is already facing some enormous challenges.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off by looking at this fragile piece. Then we'll dive into the two-phase plan that's at the very heart of it. After that, we're going to examine the cracks that are already showing up, get to the bottom of the core impasse that's freezing all progress, and finally take a look at what the very uncertain future might hold. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in October of 2025. A conflict that claimed over 70,000 lives has just ended with a ceasefire, and the sense of relief is just immense. Now, this wasn't just any old agreement. It was based on a US-led initiative, the Trump 20-point plan, and it even got the official stamp of approval from the UN Security Council. For the first time in a long, long time, it felt like there was a real glimmer of hope.
So, what's the actual blueprint for making this peace last? Well, at its core, it's a pretty ambitious two-part structure. The whole idea is to move from the immediate, urgent need to just stop the fighting to the much more complicated, long-term goal of actually rebuilding Gaza. So let's break this down. Phase 1 is basically the emergency response, right? It's all about stopping the violence. Suspend all military operations, exchange hostages for prisoners, pull Israeli forces back a bit, and get a massive flood of humanitarian aid in. We're talking 600 trucks a day. But phase 2, well, that's where things get really tricky. This is about the long game, figuring out permanent security, setting up a whole new government run by a technocratic committee, and then tackling the absolutely monumental task of reconstruction.
And that, of course, brings us to the harsh reality. Because a plan on paper is one thing, but making it work on the ground, that's a whole other story. Despite the formal agreement, despite that initial wave of relief, this ceasefire is already fraying. It feels like the ink was barely dry before the trust in the steel started to just fall apart.
And this number, wow, this really tells the story. According to reports that the Sufyan Center cited, over 500 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire was supposed to be in effect. Now, this isn't all-out war, but it's this deadly, low-level violence that totally undermines the entire spirit of the truce. And this timeline just shows you how quickly things started to go south. The ceasefire starts in October 2025. Great. But by January 2026, you have a wave of Israeli strikes that kill at least 32 people, attacks described as the heaviest since the truce began. Now, Israel says these are responses to Hamas militia movements. Then in February, the absolutely critical Rafah border crossing reopens, but it's a total bottleneck, with serious limitations and delays that just dampens any real sense of progress. So what's the deal? Why is this happening? It's because the whole plan is completely stuck. You've got these fundamental disagreements that no one can seem to solve, and the very institutions that were designed to oversee the peace, well, they're failing to even get off the ground. Progress has basically been frozen solid. And it really all comes down to this one huge issue, the disarmament deadlock. On one side, you have Israel, and they are demanding the complete disarmament of Hamas. They even claim a 60-day deadline was part with the deal, and after that, they could resume the war. But on the other side, you have Hamas's political leader, Khalid Mashal, who has just flat-out rejected any calls to disarm what he calls an occupied population. This single issue, according to the Sufyan Center, is the core sticking point of this entire peace process. And it's not just that one disagreement. The whole support system is crumbling. This Board of Peace, most Western allies are refusing to join because they see it as a US-dominated body trying to sideline the UN. The International Stabilization Force, they can't get countries to actually commit troops because there's no clear mandate. And then there's the Palestinian Technocratic Committee, the very group that's supposed to be governing Gaza. They're appointed, but they're stuck working out of Egypt because they can't even get into the territory. So where does all of this leave us? Well, it leads to a deeply, deeply uncertain future. This plan was supposed to be a bridge from war to peace, but there's a real danger that everyone could just get trapped on the bridge itself, creating a permanent state of crisis. And the International Crisis Group warns about this exact scenario. They call it a humanitarian purgatory. Just think about that. It's a state where the war is technically over, but there's no recovery, there's no rebuilding, and worst of all, there's no hope.
Gaza would just stay divided and destitute, with people surviving on aid, but with absolutely no path to a real future. And while this whole peace process is kind of stuck in the mud, the world doesn't just stop turning. The key players aren't just sitting around waiting. Israel, for one, is already actively pursuing a very different strategy on the global stage, one that looks beyond its traditional relationships and towards new kinds of partnerships.
And this pivot is a really big deal. In a major policy announcement, Prime Minister Netanyahu has laid out a 10-year plan for Israel to become totally self-sufficient. And what's the goal? To phase out U.S. financial aid completely and shift toward economic partnerships instead, especially with massive economies like India. This is a fundamental rethinking of Israel's entire strategy, and maybe it signals a belief that it needs to secure its own future, with or without a successful resolution in Gaza.
Which, of course, leaves us with the ultimate question. With the peace plan stalled, with these intractable disagreements, and with key players like Israel already planning for a different future, is this truce really a genuine path to a lasting peace? Or is it just a temporary pause, a brief, fragile pause, before a return to a conflict that has no clear end in sight?